SuperTalk Mississippi and SuperTalk.fm.
More to talk about here. In the studio is Senator Angela Hill, Mississippi State Senator, and on the phone from Common Core expert at the Pioneer Institute is Jamie Gass. Angela, the Department of Education apparently has removed the testing equipment or requirement for U.S. history in public high schools. Apparently, principals and superintendents were arguing that the U.S. history scores were dragging their school rating down, so they voted to remove the requirement. Surely this could not be so.
Well, what I understand is that the Accountability Task Force, who met last week, has made a recommendation to the Curriculum Review Board, Commission on Accreditation, to not count the U.S. history test as a component of accountability or as a graduation requirement. Mm-hmm. That is my understanding.
Why?
My understanding is, from what I've heard talk across the state, is about 3,500 students did not pass this exam and therefore would not graduate from high school. So I think that is a huge component in the decision. And I have also heard the cost element thrown out there because, at this point, all across the United States, there is a de-emphasis on American history as a testing component for graduation.
It is a bonding with patriotism. If you don't know your history, you don't give a damn about this country. If you know your history, whether you're white, black, brown, or fuchsia, you care about it. You understand if we repeat it, it is more than just a class. It is an integral part of being an American. I got to ask you, Angela, Senator Angela Hill, my guest, isn't this a component of one of the ways to kill us from within?
It certainly can be, and the saddest thing that I can sit here and tell you this morning is that the folks across the state of Mississippi have been whitewashed for a number of years, believing that the test that we currently have in place actually teaches a huge component of American history and tests that component. But the truth of the matter is it does not. The current test that we have in place that has been up for review and possibly dismissal as a component, this test only covered American history from 1877 to the present. This test that we have had in place, this Mississippi Curriculum U.S. History Test, did not test the founding, the Civil War, Reconstruction, the War of 1812, did not test on the founding documents, and all these things that make us patriotic and cause us to have that deep connection with the foundation of this country and actually help it make us love this country and want to defend this country.
I agree with you. Now, Jamie, is that indigenous of only Mississippi, or do you find this elsewhere in the country?
No, that's exactly right. Generally across the country, you're seeing that there's an enormous amount of historical illiteracy, and the problem is, of course, the reason why public schools were established, and people like Jefferson in Virginia and John Adams in Massachusetts, the reason why they even talked about setting up public education was to have an educated citizenship so that they could perpetuate the principles and laws and ideals of our country. So to not do that, or to neglect those foundational texts in the history of our country, is really just, it's stunning. I mean,
it is.
You couldn't make up a way to hurt yourself more than to not know your past.
Apparently, we've dumbed down our schools so much, and one of the things that we have intentionally dumbed down is history, to the point where we've done such a great job, they are failing it, so we need to take it out of the component so they can pass. Jamie?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, there's been, over the last 20, 30 years, there has been this effort to just focus on English language arts and math and science, oftentimes to the exclusion of history.
Senator Hill, why specifically in the testing that we did have, did our history start at 1877 instead of earlier?
I really don't know.
Who checks these books that we get?
Now the founding and the documents are in the books, or at least were in the books that my children had. But the testing component did not cover those.
Okay, the testing components don't cover it.
The testing components did not cover those. As a matter of fact, there's 60 questions on the test that we currently have. 14 of those questions are on the American political system or civics, like major social problems. Then 12 are on global position of the United States. 12 are on the history of the human and civil rights movement. 14 are on economics and the transformation of the U.S. economy, and then 8 questions on culture. So are we really getting rid of a U.S. history test?
All right, on this Common Core thing, what's your evaluation, Jamie, of this new program?
Okay, so what we've done is we looked at every draft of the Common Core standards. They did 4 drafts before the states adopted in 2010, and we looked at it and had high-quality academic experts from Massachusetts and California, high-standard states, look at it. And what we found is the Common Core was of lower academic quality in both English language arts and math at every step of the way, every draft that they've submitted.
Wait a minute. It would lower standards?
It's lower standards. So Massachusetts and California and Texas and a bunch of other states had very, very high-quality standards. But they didn't start there. They started very low, and that's why they were able to get so many states to adopt. But they make the claim that these are sort of internationally benchmarked to the best performing countries, but they're not even benchmarks to the best performing states in the union. But the real focus of this is that the folks in Washington, D.C. for 20, 30 years, and some of the players are the same that pushed this in the mid-'90s under the Clinton administration, they have always believed in nationalized education. That is what they believe. They believe that's how we're going to get out of this crisis, that states and localities who pay for 90% of education can't do it. And so what they believe is that it all should be centralized in Washington, D.C., and the Obama administration, in conjunction with a variety of trade organizations in Washington, D.C., have been pushing this for the last several years. And, of course, what will happen is that they'll determine the standards and the tests, and the people in the localities across and the states who pay for it all are going to have to pay for it. And what we know is that it's not good quality, and we know that in a state like Mississippi, it's going to, on top of what the state spends, it's going to be an additional $180 million. But the thing that sort of concerns us the most is that there are actually 3 federal laws that were signed in 1965, 1970, and 1979. Some of them were signed by Democratic presidents like Lyndon Johnson and Jimmy Carter that explicitly prohibits the federal government from controlling the standards, the curriculum, and the test.
Angela, when you say we've adopted some of it here in the state of Mississippi, what parts have we adopted?
As far as I know, we have totally adopted Common Core in the state of Mississippi. The way the federal government got the states involved in Common Core was they dangled a carrot like they always do. It was an ability to compete for the race to the top money that was offered by the Obama administration. A second way to get states involved was as a waiver from No Child Left Behind. The jury's still out. We adopted this without ever seeing any assessments and without ever seeing really hardly any of the curriculum. It wasn't even written at the time that the states adopted it. So, as far as I'm concerned, some of the research that I've seen and what we're hearing on this program is very concerning to me. I'm afraid that it may be like the Affordable Health Care Act that we have to implement it to see what's in it, and that's the part that concerns me.
How do we get control of this, Angela? You're a former teacher. How do we get control of this?
Well, sometimes I think that, although with curriculum, you certainly have the potential out there for any type of political indoctrination, depending on who's writing this curriculum, and that's another concern that I have, because, the Gates Foundation had a huge component and it played a huge role in the development of Common Core, and some of the informational texts that are suggested in the Common Core curriculum are presidential executive orders, essays on health care, and it certainly leaves a potential for a type of political indoctrination maybe in some of these informational texts that are in Common Core. So my opinion with learning is, you can teach a child. The curriculum sometimes, the particulars of the curriculum are not as important in the learning factor. Where they become the most important is in the the factor that you get certain ideas implanted in a child's head, and that's what concerns me.
We've done that from global warming to everything else. We have terribly ruined our educational system in this country. Final thoughts, Jamie?
Yeah, I think that the senator is exactly right. The analogy here is that this is like Obamacare for education. And while folks in New England are really proud of our writers in the 19th century, a state like Mississippi, Faulkner, Eudora Welty, Will Percy, Walker Percy, Shelby, things will be brushed aside.
We got to go. We got to go. Appreciate it. Angela, thank you. Stay on this and let us know what happens, okay?
Thank you.
You got it.
SuperTalk Mississippi and SuperTalk.fm.